It's like forgetting who you think that you were supposed to be.
Right.
And really uncovering who you were designed to be this entire time.
Right. It's remembering. It's basically what I call it is this like soul remembrance, right? It's forgetting, it's unlearning, like what we talked about in the last video, which is phase 2 of the process of conscious creating your life, is unlearning everything you've been taught up to this point and remembering what your soul knows to be true for you.
Yeah.
And that is what leads to this awakening, right? Which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Welcome back, Life Unchained family. It is Chris and Danielle here, and we are in episode number 3 of our 4-part series discussing going from the phase of kind of being in the unawareness phase, but knowing something needs to change, to being a full-blown conscious creator of your own life. Yeah. To recap really quickly, our first episode was how do you know that you're getting a gentle nudge for a change? How do you start tapping into that aspect? We gave you guys some strategies to do that. Check that episode out. The next episode, we talked a lot about conscious and unconscious learning. We talked a little bit about the unlearning phase, which was huge. Right. Mm-hmm. And today I'm excited because we're going to talk to Danielle a little bit about the awakening phase, which is really where the rubber meets the road. It's the next phase. You decided, you're moving forward. And we're going to talk about maybe 3 things that are going to help you begin to actually cultivate this awakening, and kind of talk about maybe a little bit of the chaos that goes with that too.
Yeah.
So I know, Danielle, in your work, you do a lot of intuitive guidance, obviously a lot of divine healing. Can you explain that before we get into anything about kind of what that is and how you work with clients? I know last year you worked with well over 500 people, which is amazing. But what does that work kind of entail?
So it's really going deep into the layers of our subconscious and unconscious, basically what we're storing on an energetic level outward. The things that we don't know in our conscious mind are keeping us stuck. Mm-hmm. So this could be energy from a situation that happened as a child, for example, right? Or conditioned beliefs from childhood or from someone in the earth, right, that we've taken on as our own, and it's in turn affecting us. It's kind of like you get this stagnant energy that kind of gets stuck in your meridian center somewhere in your body, which then causes emotional pain, physical pain, or dis-ease. That's where disease comes from, right? Mm-hmm. Is basically just stagnant energy in the body, in the meridian centers. So we really go through a deep dive into what that is and how we can kind of eradicate and shift and clear that energy accordingly so that you can then line back up with your original blueprint of your health in mind, body, and soul.
Yeah, so for a more kind of direct, kind of like it's like forgetting who you think that you were supposed to be,
right?
And really uncovering who you were designed to be this entire time,
right? It's remembering. It's basically what I call it is this like soul remembrance, right? It's forgetting, it's unlearning, like what we talked about in the last video, which is phase 2 of the process of conscious creating your life, is unlearning everything you've been taught up to this point and remembering what your soul knows to be true for you, and that is what leads to this awakening, right? Which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, kind of waking up from the dream, right?
Right.
Waking up from the dream and awakening to, I always think about Neo in the Matrix, the red pill, blue pill, the awakening phase. So, our goal here is to make sure that we bridge the gap between like what you're talking about as a divine healer or spiritualist, because I know your background is very science-based.
Yeah.
And also the rational too. So we want to bring this together in a conscious framework to make it easier for you. But I know the first thing that we talked about was kind of in this awakening phase as we were figuring out the framework was more about tapping into your inner guidance. Mm-hmm. When somebody says, how do I tap into my inner guidance? How would you guide them through that right now?
So that is a kind of a unique process for each individual, but it really first, like number 1 for anybody, it's getting clear and still within yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's going into a place where you are distraction free, where you're making that mental intention to put all distractions aside and be present.
Cool.
And that's really step number 1 is becoming present.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about present, we live in a world where, we have phones, we have digital like distractions all the time. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be present? Like, I needed this when I first started. I needed somebody to say to me, like, this is what it should look like, and it's not right or wrong, but here it is. When you say present, what do you mean?
So when I say present, I mean really basically free of distraction. So whether being present for you means sitting in meditation pose in the dark, right? Or whether it's being in nature by yourself, just being present to what is around you in your reality. Whether it's painting, right? Or maybe it's running, maybe it's some sort of exercise, whatever it is that allows you to be present in that moment, in the here and now, distraction free. And that looks a little bit different for everybody.
So we become present. We're doing some intentional practices. We're going to talk about intentions in a minute. But what does that guidance look like, feel like, smell like? Like, am I going to start hearing voices? Am I going to see colors? Like, what's going to happen?
Right. So that looks a little bit different for everybody. And I believe we are all intuitive beings. And the way that we receive intuitive downloads or informations or connection with our own spirit is through a very, different ways for each person. Some people might literally feel like they're hearing guidance, right? Some people might have a thought that comes into their mind out of seemingly nowhere. There's no way they weren't thinking about it. It just pops in. Some people might get actual visions or prophetic dreams, right? It's almost like you can see this movie going across like your mind's eye. Or signs and symbols, things like that. Or you also just might you might just have this inner knowing where you just know that you know what is meant for you, or that there's more, right? So there's 4 different main ways, right? Via seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing. And that might come through for you in different ways. So a huge thing that I love to do, with clients at first is understand, how does their intuition speak to them? What is their dominant intuitive ability, so that when you are receiving that information versus when it's just you in your own potential fear story getting in the way?
Yeah, from another standpoint, it's like that confirmation bias thing that we have, and it's so tricky, right? Because if we're thinking from the person we used to be, then we're not finding the right answers. This is totally an unlearning and unraveling process, and it can be pretty chaotic. I remember when you shared this with me too, like I'd been doing all this personal development work, and really personal development taught me how to structure my life. It taught me to stay away from things like the news and to watch what I put into my subconscious mind, but it wasn't really helping me understand how to make decisions that were right for me. It made me like basically rely upon another system of thinking as opposed to my own system of thinking. So the shift was when you taught me how I could, and I'm very much that person who sees the vision, sees the dreams, and there's other kind of ways it shows up. And it was mind blowing. At first you're like, what is this? What is going on here? What's happening? Right? You meditate and all of a sudden you're getting vision and you're like, am I a crazy person? Right? So, it's one of those things that we've detached ourselves away in our society away from this, but it is so prevalent in the Eastern world. It's like part of life. Cool. So we talked a little bit about inner guidance and how that speaks to you. The second thing I want to talk to you about is we talk a lot about intention, and I want to have a framework of how we kind of language and talk about intention, especially in Life Unchained, but intention setting and agreement setting. When somebody asks you, like, how do I set an intention? How would you go about that?
So first, what I would say is you need to get really clear on what is the ultimate goal. That's how you set an intention. What do you want out of this, right? So if you're sitting down, for example, in meditation, what is the goal? Are you trying to just have peace? Are you trying to receive an answer or guidance, clarity around something? So start with the end in mind. What is the end goal for whatever it is that you're doing? And this is really pertaining to anything in life, anything at all, okay? But we're talking specifically right now about the awakening process, which is going inward. So setting that intention of, okay, I'm setting the intention that by the end of this meditation, I am going to have the clarity that I need, right? Or if you're working out, right? But I set the intention by the end of this workout, I will feel rejuvenated in my own energy and I feel like I got the best workout ever, right? It could be anything at all, but intention is all about what you are consciously putting forth that you want to see in the end result of whatever it is that you are doing in that moment.
I love that. That's so good. I mean, that happens with business. It happens with our relationships. It happens with everything. Like, for me, the shadow of intention, the opposite of intention, the polarity of that is literally just, it's that unawakened dreamlike drift. Right. So drift is on the other side of intention, where it's like, you're kind of just following what your body is pushing you into. And I love what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about with that too. It's like a predictable future based on our past, because our body is just moving us forward to it. So I think that's super, super crucial of like, and I guess a good distinction may be too of like, instead of being a human doing, you're a human being.
Totally.
Like how am I going to be tomorrow in terms of what am I going to do, right?
Right. I mean, I fully believe that intention is the catalyst to anything that you want to have, right? The intention is the catalyst of being the conscious creator of your life versus just letting life happen to you and being the victim of your circumstance.
Yeah, so powerful. Going to events and stuff like that. I remember going to speaking events and saying, what are my intentions for this event? And when I walked away from it, I would look and see what happened, and I would say to myself, every single thing I put on this checklist happens. From the people that I met to the experiences I had, it's not magical. It's tapping into the spiritual conscious and the neurological components. It's so powerful. What about agreements? I'm huge on agreements too. I know you are as well. But when somebody says about setting agreements,
Right.
Well, how would we understand what that means?
So setting agreements is really kind of like the guidelines essentially that you want to live by in whatever it is that you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm really big on setting relationship agreements. A lot of the work that I do is around relationships, interpersonal as well as romantic. And in terms of coming into that space with somebody, it's really setting the agreement of like, what do you want the intention to be mutually? Mm-hmm. What are the guidelines that you want this relationship to live by, basically, right? This could be business partnerships, this could be anything. Setting agreements with yourself on how you want to live your life. That basically these are your own intentions and agreements that you're saying, I commit this to myself and I am going to do this. It's really establishing your core truths and values in a way that is so intrinsic to you that you live your life by those guidelines.
Yeah, and so in life it can be kind of awkward at first because it's like we don't do this stuff. So when I sit down with somebody brand new, especially like in a friendship, I'll let people know like what my agreements are, like how I live my life. Like it's basically like setting your boundaries and making them known so that you can both have the ultimate success in the relationship, which we just don't get taught how to do.
Right.
You know, something like my close friends and family, like we don't explain ourselves to each other because we just know. Don't waste the time. Don't explain it. It's just, it is. You know what I mean? So that can be really, really powerful. Now, the third thing I want to talk to you about is something really, really powerful as well, which is tapping into your life vision, which is a big one, right?
Yes, that's a whole episode on its own, really.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive into the shallow end on this a little bit because we go into this in Life Unchained a lot.
Yes.
Let's tap into life vision. How do we tap into life vision?
So tapping into life vision is really brilliant. For me, okay, if you're somebody like me who kind of is more prone to living in your head, maybe you're a really high achiever, type A type of person, right, that always has a plan, you're gonna need to get out of your head and into your heart, right? And that's really hard to do because anytime we're creating a vision just from our head, we don't have the level of willpower to keep going, right? Versus when we are creating something and doing something out of the greatness of our heart because our soul is on fire and lit up by what we're doing, that's what leads to like lasting transformation, lasting joy and fulfillment. So I think number one is getting out of your head and into your heart. So whatever that modality is for you, that's what you need to do. For me, that's very much energy work and doing a lot of meditation and getting out of my head and getting into my heart. For you, that might be exercise, that might be doing something creative, that might be doing something that just totally gets you out of your own way, basically.
Yeah.
And so once you're out of your own way and you're able to get into that heart-centered space of feeling of like, what is the most joyous thing that I could possibly do? What is the thing that I would jump out of bed in the morning to do because I'm so passionate about, right? And then casting that vision like wide and far, and then assimilating from there, how do I bring that to life? How do I bring that to life in a way that is in most alignment with me, in a way that I can use all of my spiritual gifting, in a way that I can use all of my talents, my abilities, my passions, my education, my experience, everything. Yeah. How can I use all that I am to contribute to this world and to also have inner peace and joy and fulfillment?
Yeah. Going through this process, I mean, let's recap the 3 steps we've gone through so far. We talked about in the very beginning your awareness phase, which is like you feel like something should change. We're not quite knowing what it is, but we say, I don't know, but I'm open. Something has to change. It's like the shaking awake, right? Then it's the unlearning. It's you begin to see some new information. It starts to create something within you that creates that tension that's like something has to give. And chances are you kind of push yourself beyond that friction point to go pursue more. And now we just talked about awakening, which is, okay, now we're open, we're receiving some new information based on who we were designed to be, not who we were told we were.
Right.
Things like our intention setting, how we begin to vision our life becomes so catalytic. And this is stuff that we continue to do ourselves. I mean, there's various levels to this, so it doesn't stop ever. It's like new ways of pulling this out of you. And so that life vision, we begin to intention to that life and vision, the setting from the intention of that life vision. So now we're starting to be actively creating in this process.
Right.
And the next phase is conscious creation.
Yeah.
Which I'm really excited to talk about in our next episode, and we can collaborate on that. So I think we did a great job of kind of talking about 3 aspects of the awakening phase.
Sure.
Before we go, though, I want to kind of maybe briefly touch on, in this phase, a lot is going on in our lives.
Absolutely.
I know we both have stories about this. We know a lot of stories of others.
Oh, yeah.
But things seemingly feel like they're falling apart.
Totally.
What was your experience with this?
You know, oh gosh, during my awakening phase, my life pretty much did fall apart, right? Seemingly before my eyes, my life as I knew it, everything began to change. I left my corporate career. I ended up getting a divorce. I had huge, issues with people in a small town that didn't understand, the bigger picture of life and energetics, who didn't agree with what I knew to be true for me, right? And so it's really breaking that people pleasing, that perfectionism, that living for everybody else, and finally coming back into your own heart and realizing what is true for you and how are you going to live that out now? How are you going to execute on that in your life? And so, for me, basically everything changed in my life, quite literally. But it's like when you have that vision and you know where you're going and you have that level of conviction behind it, nothing and no one can stop you from pursuing that with all of your heart, because it is fueled from your soul, not just from your head. And if it was in your head, typically that's where we see people get stuck. That's where we see people just keep living the same life over and over again, day by day, even when they're not satisfied, because they're not pulled by a vision that is greater than them. They're not pulled by a vision that's coming from their heart. They're living in their head. So if you find yourself in that realm where you're unhappy, you're not satisfied, there has to be more, but you're not doing anything about it, so you're complaining about it every day and basically living that hell day in and day out, then that's your sign of like, let's go deeper here. Let's get out of your head and into your heart and see what the real issue is here, so that you can begin that conscious creation process of, like we talked about, the unlearning and the awakening, and then becoming that conscious creator. And you have that opportunity, you have that choice, but that's the whole point. It is a choice. Yeah. You get to choose whether that's what you want or not.
I got goosebumps. That was amazing. Keep going, right? Man, we talked about so much that I believe any segment in this video could put you on a journey for a long time. We're distilling lifetime full of our experience into what we can make as bite-sized as possible. Of course, the Clarity Roadmap that we're talking about here has a lot of exercises, things that we feel have been deeply catalytic for us and clients to help them in the process.
Yeah.
Go do the work. Right now is such an interesting time in our world, right? And I'm saying that now, even though this is recorded, because this will be documentation of a time in our history where this kind of stuff is going to be so deeply important.
Right.
So I want to end there and encourage you all, if you guys have not yet, check us out at yourlifeunchained.com. Go check out the Clarity Roadmap. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, get the notifications. Make sure you guys are tuning into the content, and also make sure you guys connect with us on Instagram and Facebook, so that we can serve you in any way that we can. And we can't wait to see you living your life unchained. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.